Hello, AP Bio. It's Mrs. Ness-Deden. Good news, there is no new content today, and not really anything of a lecture. I'm going to do a little review and then a brief introduction of today's activity, and then you just have some work to do on a case study using what you learned about cellular respiration. So first, just a quick review. Here's a whole bunch of vocabulary that came up during yesterday's lecture about cellular respiration. See if you can kind of put this in order. Try and see if there's anything you can do without using your notes. Keep in mind, these don't all go 1, 2, 3, 4. Some of them are kind of happening at the same time. But see if you can kind of figure out how these terms go together. So looking at this, I would start out by kind of rearranging the ones that I know go in a certain order. So let's see. I know that glycolysis is the first step, so I'd move that one kind of up towards the beginning. The electron transport chain is the last step. I'm just going to move some of these over on the side. And the citric acid cycle is in the middle. So those are kind of our three main steps. Hang on, move that word out of the way. So those are kind of our three main steps of cellular respiration. Glycolysis and the citric acid cycle, if you remember, are the two that fill up a lot of these electron carriers. So I might put this word somewhere up by these two. Glycolysis and the citric acid cycle both fill electron carriers, that NADH and FADH2. They also produce a little bit of ATP. And if you noticed in the notes yesterday, they produce ATP through a process called substrate level phosphorylation. It is still generating ATP, but it's doing it in a slightly different way than the electron transport chain, than our third step down here. The electron transport chain uses redox reactions, which actually happen all the way through, but particularly through the electron transport chain. The electrons from those electron carriers are passed from one thing to the next, which generates a proton gradient. That's that proton motive force, that difference in concentration of hydrogen ions that makes those proteins want to diffuse. As they diffuse across the inner mitochondrial membrane, that process is called chemiosmosis. And that produces that the hydrogen diffuses through ATP synthase to produce ATP. And this type of ATP production is called oxidative phosphorylation. So here we have it all kind of arranged. If you had something kind of similar to this, then that is good enough. So glycolysis and the citric acid cycle produce ATP through substrate level phosphorylation, and they also fill a bunch of electron carriers. That's primarily that NADH and that FADH2. And those electron carriers then bring those electrons to the electron transport chain, which uses a series of redox reactions to pump protons into the intermembrane space. As those protons diffuse back, that process of chemiosmosis powers ATP synthase to make lots and lots more ATP through oxidative phosphorylation. So there you go. That is your 1-minute review of the process of cellular respiration. Today, we're going to look at this in a very different way. We are going to work on a case study called The Mystery of the 7 Deaths. This is based on a true story, and at the very end of the case study, you'll get a chance to learn a little bit more about the true story that this is based on. But as soon as you finish this short ed puzzle, you are going to go and open a Google form that's linked on today's classroom post. The first slide the first part of it just has you put in your name and your hour and stuff. But the important thing is once you actually get into it, there are 4 parts to this. You get a little bit of information and need to analyze what you can. Then you get a little more information and you need to analyze that some more. So as you open these links, this is the link for part 1. It'll open a PDF. keep these open in other tabs on your browser because you might want to refer back to part 1 when you get to part 3 or part 4. And so you want to have these open as you're working. So you'll open part 1 and answer these first 2 questions. You will not be allowed to move forward until you've answered those questions. And then when you get to the next screen, it will give you another link to part 2 so that you can continue working on this. If for some reason you need to stop in the middle of this, you should make sure to keep your browser open so you don't lose your work. It will be best if you can do this all in one sitting so that you remember the information that you were looking at and kind of get this assignment all done at once. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions. You can use your notes from yesterday. You can use the information provided in these documents, but do your best to figure out what's going on and make connections with what we learned yesterday. Have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you again soon.